Billy here. Wow. I'm going to do a little primer. This is on what Americans call the deep state. And you need to get your thinking right, as the sheriff or the warden said in Cool Hand Luke. You need to get your mind right, boy. You need to get your thinking right. Because most people are still trapped in this false dichotomy of left versus right. And they think of the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians. You have certain caricatures that you have painted of them that you've got from the movies and television that aren't true. To think that they're monolithic, to think that they're monolithic structures. No modern state is a monolithic structure. They all have factions. And the main faction, the most dangerous faction and the most successful faction, is an international cabal of criminals. That involves international finance, corporations, people that call themselves the globalists, Nazi ideology. They've gotten a lock on educational system and the media in the West. They have had for quite some time. There is an international conspiracy of these people, and why wouldn't there be? The face that you see of it, like George Soros, I mean, you could just use him and what he's got his fingers in and what he's done for the last several years, or last 20 years, and see it. And he was a Nazi. He was a Nazi who appropriated the property of the Jewish victims during the Holocaust and turned it over to the whoever received it. I suppose they were probably Schulzenstoffen authorities, but he worked for them and he got to keep some of it, and he probably pocketed a lot of it, and it's where his fortune was started. He was an actual Jewish Nazi. Who knew? They did have a Judenreich, but that's another subject. There's a lot of things that are just people don't believe. They automatically resist facts because they contradict what they've been taught, and they contradict the caricature that was inculcated by the narratives and the shows and the TV and the media and your school. It's really hard to get to people when they've had that sort of training and programming. This international cabal has fifth columns in all countries. Some of them are a lot more successful than others. Some countries are much more successful at resisting them. And those countries are on the shit list right now as enemies that have to be destroyed and taken care of. Russia is the main one because it's the most powerful, not necessarily the most successful. There are non-state actors that have had to be developed. The cabal was so integral in destroying Lebanon that a Lebanese political party had to start manufacturing weapons and become a security service and evolved into Hezbollah. Well, that's a terrorist organization, isn't it? No. I think the most monolithic and factionless entity probably is Hezbollah, because they're not a nation state and they don't have that weakness. And then there's Russia, has been massively successful against these more and more. The fight is ongoing. They're still dealing with their fifth column. And they've made a lot of progress most recently. The U.S., well, we've got kind of a struggle going on here, don't we? Well, you know what happened. Is Trump against the deep state? Is he against the global cabal, the global mafia, the factions that are in the U.S.? Well, I'd call it more than a faction. They have a pretty good lock on things, don't they? And is Trump really against them? Oh, I don't know. Trump is no saint. He's not the second coming. He's a human being. I think he's kind of maybe a little corrupt, actually. I see evidence of it. Is he one of them? Well, he's a different corrupt. He's a different faction, I'd say, but not that faction. A corrupt faction? Yeah, he's not pure as the wind driven snow, but that's pretty much how America happened. America was founded in the space between internecine warfare between the factions. The British imperial faction were full of old ossified criminals that were just lining their pockets and locking everything down, and nothing was really going anywhere. A bunch of bright young Turks over in the colonies saw an opportunity. Well, they're wasting opportunities. They're wasting everything. They're locking people down. Nothing goes anywhere. You can't do anything because all the profit has to go straight to, the crown and their flunkies. Hey fellas, we could break off a piece of the action for ourselves. All we have to do is get the people here on our side. And to do that, you have to make concessions. And we have all this freedom and liberty and blah, 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 blah to get the people on your side and have a popular rebellion, and then you're successful. And then you have to start screwing the lid down on things to have your... Well, Jeff Spicoli was a great historian. In Fast Times at Ridgemont High, if you've seen it, Mr. Hahn comes to tutor Jeff, because Mr. Hahn was a dedicated teacher. He's a real teacher. And he went to his house, and Jeff was a little stoned, but you couldn't really tell because he was a permabuzz. And Jeff made a synopsis of U.S. history by saying, "This place is bogus, and we're going to go somewhere else and make our own cool rules so we can be bogus too." He didn't know how accurate that was, Jeff's character. Or the character Jeff Spicoli, Sean Penn's character. Mr. Hahn was astonished, and he gave him a passing grade because Mr. Hahn probably knew that that's the case. American project managers, governors, colonial generals, planters, they had an organization too, and they decided they can break off the piece of the action for themselves, but they have to make a popular movement. And that space in this conflict is, I know that's not the romantic version that you were taught in school, but that's the way I see it. Call me a cynic. The space that they created is where we had our liberty. And it was astonishing. I think that they were amazed at the production and the productivity. It had to be guided, because if you just, we're free now, and let everybody do what they wanted, everybody just went off into the hills and made whiskey and laid around drunk all the time. That's why they had the whiskey rebellion. They had to start taxing liquor so people would be a little more productive than that. There is a need for governance. Leave people to their own devices. They do degenerate, but you need good governance. And we've had it for a long time. We're very fortunate. And so much stuff happened from the very beginning that was British intelligence meddling in things and causing problems, and people fell for some of their tricks, and on and on. I'm getting off subject here. What I want to convey to you in this short video is a primer of how to think about all these governments, because I see it all. The Chi-Coms are doing this to us. They started the COVID so they can take over America. You're thinking like a 2-year-old. The Chi-Coms? Who are they? There is a Chinese Communist Party, and they're part of the international cabal. And there's also a Chinese government that's opposed to it. In Russia, there's a fifth column that has lost all credibility and is very weak and vulnerable because the security services of Russia created the atmosphere that they have now with Putin. And Putin is a president, and he obeys law. He obeys Russian law, he obeys international law. He goes by the law. He's not a dictator. He's a constitutional government. He has to convene meetings and have votes on what they're doing, and there's fifth columnists that vote. But they get so much crap, and they know they won't stay in power, and they're going to be so maligned, rightly so, if they go against the Russian people's national interests. I know how it works. I was there, and I know these people. I have personal friends that are there. I have people that I have met that are journalists that are on the ground. I was in the Russian Civic Chamber when they voted to recognize the Donetsk republics. And now the Donetsk republics, the Donbass republics, Donetsk and Lugansk, are joined in the Russian Federation. The cabal is losing big time. We're coming up to I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but there's a German word for the big giant orgy of destruction at the final chapter of an opera. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I know how it's spelled though. Dammerhansfrug, something like that. Look it up. Yeah. As we approach this, you need to get your mind right and know that there are factions in everything. Some exceptions. I think Hezbollah is one, and I think the Democratic Party in the U.S. is one too. They don't have any factions. They're total 100% for the international criminal cabal. Lock, stock, and barrel. This is a war between an international criminal cabal, and they're criminals. And I'm not talking about people sneaking around and pickpocketing. I'm talking about bankers and favored corporations. They're lackeys in government and regulatory businesses and regulatory organizations and international regulatory and observation organizations that are in the UN. I think the UN has factions. Agenda 2030 or whatever it is now. Not everybody is all for that. The UN is all about international law and avoiding conflict, but they have factions, and I think the upper hand belongs to the international mafia. They've had NGOs, they have think tanks for decades that were moving this stuff along. And as long as you trust what they tell you in the media, and as long as you carry these stupid, one-dimensional, cartoonish, bigoted ideas of what an Iranian is, or what a Russian is, or what a Chinese is, or what the communism even is, or socialism, or anything else, because those aren't your enemies. And corporations are. And their organizations, and their project managers, and their lackeys. The only face you see is the project managers. You don't see who tells them what to do. Klaus Schwab is a major one. He's kind of a general manager, but I don't think he makes the decisions. He's told what to do by someone that you don't get to see, or some consortium more likely. And people, oh, this is a conspiracy. How could all those people keep a secret? Again, that's cartoonish, one-dimensional thinking of a 2-year-old. That's the thinking of an imbecile. You need to be more sophisticated than that. It's easy to keep a secret if you compartmentalize things and if you have the proper organization. The Babylonian Mystery Organization, as I've seen described by some Russian intellectuals, operates thusly. You could start at the top with 1 or 2 individuals that are real project managers over the whole planet project. Each one of them has 7 people under him. Those 7 people don't know each other. They only know their boss. And each of them has 7 people under them. And each of those 7 people only know their boss. They don't know the other 7. They don't know anybody above. Going up, you only have 1 contact. And that contact contacts you and tells you what to do. That's how it works. That's the organizational chart. They say there's 7 layers to it. So it's 7 times 7 at the bottom. That's a lot of people. What's 7 times 7? Oh, wait, that's even more than, okay. Each layer, each person of each layer has 7 people under him. And each of those has 7 under him. You get to a lot of people. And you're not very far down from the top either. They can have them in key positions of multinational corporations and financial institutions and world bodies, following instructions and doing what they're told to. And they are absolutely loyal. They have something on them, or they are enthusiastic about it. It's a cult. If they don't do what they're supposed to, they're humiliated or done away with and replaced very quickly. It's easy to do. It is a very basic, simple organization, and it does work. And they can keep secrets very easily. You'd be amazed at how many people you could have in on a secret with the proper lies and the proper motivation, and nobody's going to say a word. If anybody does, everybody will think they're crazy. Control the media is 90% of it. And they have controlled media for a long time. Stop thinking in a two-dimensional, cartoonish, false dichotomy. The Chinese aren't your enemy. Maybe the Communist Party of China is. The Russians aren't your enemy. Some factions are, and some people who have been allowed to retain power because they're not doing what the cabal tells them to anymore. They're doing what the opposition tells them to. They're in a real pickle. But, you know, you can make people behave properly. It's sometimes easier than replacing them. I could go on and on. You have to think strategically. What would I do if I had all this power and I was in this position? And it comes together pretty well. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. I thought it might be interesting for some people. It's amazing how many people just don't go there. They just don't think like that. Don't seem to want to, because it spoils your little Pollyanna world where everything is wonderful and everything's just fine and you can trust the authorities. Look at what it's got you so far, and it's going to get really ugly in the very near future. It's reaching the big final showdown, perhaps. Anyway, Bill D, signing out.